My name is Serafina, and I thought I knew my family until I discovered my mother had secretly spent $80,000 of my inheritance money on my spoiled sister's wedding. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife when I realized this was not just about money, but about years of favoritism I had been blind to see. Standing in my childhood bedroom holding the bank statements that proved everything, I made a decision that would shatter our family forever. What I did next changed everything. Before we dive into this wild family drama that will leave you questioning everything about blood loyalty, I want to know where my amazing viewers are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And do not forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you will want to see how this family betrayal unfolds and how justice gets served cold. Now let's get into this crazy story. 6 months ago, my life was perfectly ordinary. I was 28, working as a software developer in Seattle, and saving every penny for my dream house. My inheritance from Grandma Eleanor had been sitting untouched in a joint savings account that Mom helped me set up when I turned 18. Back then, I trusted her completely. She was my financial advisor, my confidant, and the woman who raised me to believe family comes first, above everything else. My younger sister Delphine had always been the golden child. 3 years younger blonde where I was brunette, outgoing where I was introverted. She could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I spent my teenage years studying and working part-time jobs, Delphine was cheerleading, dating the popular boys, and somehow never facing consequences for her impulsive decisions. When she dropped out of college junior year to pursue her dreams of becoming an influencer, Mom and Dad supported her completely. When I questioned whether that was wise, I was labeled as jealous and unsupportive. The first red flag should have been when Delphine announced her engagement to Bradley, a trust fund baby she had been dating for 8 months. The wedding planning began immediately, and every family gathering became a detailed discussion about venues, dresses, flowers, and catering. Mom was beside herself with excitement, constantly showing me Pinterest boards and venue photos on her phone. Dad seemed stressed about the costs, but Mom kept assuring him that everything would work out perfectly. I started noticing the subtle hints about 3 months before the wedding. Mom would make comments about how expensive everything was, how Delphine deserved the perfect day, and how family should support each other during important milestones. She started asking weird questions about my savings goals and whether I really needed to buy a house right away. When I mentioned that I was ready to start seriously house hunting with my inheritance money, she got this strange look on her face and quickly changed the subject. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was reviewing my finances before meeting with a realtor, and I decided to check the balance on my inheritance account to see exactly how much I had available for a down payment. Grandma Eleanor had left me $50,000, and with my own savings and careful investing, it had grown to just over $80,000 over the past decade. I logged into my online banking expecting to see that familiar number, but instead my screen showed a balance of $312. My heart stopped. I refreshed the page multiple times, convinced there was some kind of technical error. But the transaction history told a story that made my blood run cold. Starting 4 months ago, there were regular withdrawals. 5,000 for Moonlight Garden venue, 3,000 for Elegant Affairs catering, 2,000 for Bella's Bridal Boutique, 7,000 for Paradise Resort honeymoon package. The list went on and on, each transaction authorized by the secondary account holder, my mother. I called the bank immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. The representative confirmed my worst fears. Yes, all withdrawals were legitimate. Yes, the secondary account holder had full access to make these transactions. No, there was nothing fraudulent about the activity. My mother had systematically drained my inheritance account to pay for Delphine's dream wedding, and it was completely legal because of the account setup we had agreed to 10 years earlier. I sat in my car outside the bank for 2 hours, trying to process what had happened. This was not just about money, though. $80,000 was certainly life-changing for me. This was about trust, about family loyalty, About the realization that the woman who raised me to value honesty above all else had been lying to my face for months. Every conversation about wedding expenses, every comment about supporting family, every time she had asked about my house hunting plans, she had known exactly what she was doing. The worst part was imagining how they had planned this together. I pictured Mom and Delphine sitting at the kitchen table discussing how to access my money without my knowledge. I imagined them justifying it to themselves, probably saying, I would understand eventually, that family was more important than material possessions, that Delphine needed this money more than I needed a house. The betrayal felt like a physical wound in my chest. I drove straight to my parents' house, the bank statements printed and clutched in my trembling hands. Mom was in the kitchen humming while she arranged flowers that I now realized were probably for wedding centerpiece planning. She looked up when I walked in, and her smile faded immediately when she saw my expression. Serafina, honey, what's wrong? You look terrible. I placed the bank statements on the kitchen counter between us. I know what you did. The color drained from her face, but she tried to maintain her composure. I do not know what you mean, sweetheart. My inheritance account, Mom. $80,000. Gone. Every penny spent on Delphine's wedding without my permission. She sank into a kitchen chair, her hands fluttering nervously. I was going to tell you. We were going to pay you back after the wedding. Delphine and Bradley have been struggling financially, and you know how important this day is for her. You have your job, your savings, you will be fine. But this is Delphine's one special day, and we could not let her down. The casual way she dismissed my financial security, the assumption that my money was somehow less important than Delphine's wants, ignited a rage I had never felt before. You stole from me. You looked me in the eye for months, knowing you were stealing from me, and you said nothing. It is not stealing when it is family, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You will understand when you have children of your own. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions for the good of the whole family. That was the moment I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. I left my parents' house that day with a clarity I had never experienced before. The drive home was filled with memories replaying in my mind, but now I was seeing them through a completely different lens. Every birthday where Delphine got the bigger celebration, every achievement of mine that was overshadowed by her latest drama, every time I was asked to be the responsible one while she was allowed to be carefree. I had spent my entire life thinking this was normal family dynamics, but now I understood it was systematic favoritism that had culminated in actual theft. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day planning my response. This was not going to be an emotional explosion or a dramatic confrontation. If my family wanted to play games with my financial future, then I was going to play to win. My first stop was back to the bank, where I met with the manager to understand my options. Since this is a joint account, the withdrawals were technically legal, Mr. Davidson explained. However, you have the right to freeze the account immediately and require dual signatures for any future transactions. You can also remove the secondary account holder's access entirely. I froze the account on the spot. Every remaining penny was now locked down tight. Then I opened a new account at a different bank entirely, one where no family member would ever have access. Mr. Davidson also suggested I pull my credit report to make sure no other accounts had been opened in my name. That afternoon, I discovered that Mom had indeed tried to open a credit card using my information, though thankfully it had been denied due to income verification issues. My next call was to my Uncle Marcus' dad's older brother, who worked as an attorney specializing in family law. Marcus had always been the straight shooter in our family, and he was also the only person who had ever questioned my parents' obvious favoritism toward Delphine. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and harsh. Serafina, I am so sorry this happened to you, but I cannot say I am entirely surprised. Your mother has always had boundary issues when it comes to money and what she considers fair. This crosses a legal line, though. Joint account or not, using someone else's money without their knowledge for personal expenses could be considered financial abuse. Marcus offered to write a formal demand letter for repayment, which would create a legal paper trail if I decided to pursue criminal charges later. He also recommended I document everything, save all bank records, print email communications, and keep a detailed timeline of events. If this goes to court, you want to show a pattern of deception and financial manipulation, he advised. That evening I got the call I had been expecting. Delphine was crying hysterically, barely coherent between sobs. Serafina, what did you do? The caterer called Mom and said our payment was declined. The venue is threatening to cancel our booking. You cannot do this to me. This is my wedding. I let her cry for a moment before responding calmly. I protected my money from further theft. If your payment was declined, it is because you were trying to steal from me again. It is not stealing. We are family. Mom explained everything. You have plenty of money and this is the most important day of my life. How can you be so selfish? The word selfish, coming from someone who had just spent my inheritance on her party, was so absurd that I actually laughed. Delphine, let me explain something to you. That money was my inheritance from Grandma Eleanor. It was meant for my future, my house, my security. You and Mom decided that your one day of celebration was more important than my entire financial future. That is the definition of selfish. But families help each other. You would not even miss that money. Then why did you not ask me first? Why did Mom sneak around for months lying to my face if this was such a reasonable family request? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. They had known exactly how wrong this was, which was why they had hidden it from me. If they had believed their own justifications about family loyalty, they would have been upfront from the beginning. Please, Delphine whispered. I will pay you back. We will figure something out. But please do not ruin my wedding. Everyone is expecting this perfect day, and if we have to cancel now, I will be humiliated. You should have thought about that before you spent money that was not yours, I replied. Actions have consequences, Delphine. You are about to learn that lesson. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment looking at the walls I had planned to leave behind for my own house. Everything felt different now. The family photos on my dresser looked like pictures of strangers. The childhood memories that had once felt warm and comforting now seemed tainted by the realization of how differently I had been treated all along. My phone buzzed with text after text. Mom begging me to reconsider, Dad trying to play peacekeeper, various aunts and cousins who had somehow already heard about the situation. The family group chat was blowing up with messages about how I was being unreasonable, how family should forgive and forget, how this was just a misunderstanding that had gotten out of hand. But Uncle Marcus had sent a different kind of message. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Your grandmother would have been furious about this situation. Eleanor specifically left that money to you, not the family in general. Do not let them guilt you into thinking you are the problem here. That night, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was done being the family pushover. I was done prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my own well-being. I was done pretending that blood relations automatically deserved unconditional loyalty regardless of how they treated me. I started making a list of every family event where I had been taken advantage of, every time I had been expected to be the mature one while Delphine was allowed to be irresponsible, every financial favor I had granted that had never been repaid. The pattern was clear and undeniable. This wedding theft was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as the family bank, an emotional support system, while receiving very little in return. Tomorrow I would start implementing my plan for justice. But tonight I was finally seeing my family clearly for the first time in my life. The next few days were like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Word about the frozen account spread through our extended family faster than wildfire. And I quickly discovered who my real allies were versus who simply wanted to maintain the status quo at any cost. The responses were more revealing than I had anticipated, and they helped me understand just how deep the dysfunction in my family actually ran. My cousin Sarah, who had always been Delphine's closest friend, called to scream at me about ruining the wedding of the century. Everyone has been looking forward to this for months. How can you be so petty over money? Delphine has been planning this since she was a little girl. When I explained that it was my inheritance money that had been stolen, Sarah actually had the audacity to say, "Well, you probably would have just wasted it anyway. At least this way it is going towards something beautiful and memorable." That comment crystallized something important for me. This was not really about wedding expenses or family loyalty. This was about a fundamental belief system where my needs, my goals, and my financial security were considered less valuable than Delphine's desires. I had been raised in a family where my role was to be the responsible provider, while Delphine was the precious princess whose dreams mattered more than reality. But not everyone shared that perspective. My Aunt Patricia Mom's younger sister called with a very different message. "Serafina, I have been watching this favoritism for years, and I am disgusted by what your mother did. When our mother died and left that money specifically to you, it was because she recognized how hard you worked and how responsible you were. Eleanor would be spinning in her grave if she knew how that money was being used." Patricia revealed something that shocked me completely. "Your grandmother actually came to me before she died and expressed concerns about how your parents treated you compared to Delphine. She specifically structured her will to leave money directly to you because she was worried your parents would pressure you to share it inappropriately. She wanted you to have something that was entirely yours." This revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. Grandma Eleanor had seen the family dynamics clearly and had tried to protect me even from beyond the grave. The fact that Mom had violated not just my trust, but also her own mother's explicit intentions made the betrayal even more heinous. Uncle Marcus had been busy as well. His formal demand letter arrived at my parents' house via certified mail requesting full restitution within 30 days and outlining the potential legal consequences of financial abuse between family members. The letter was professional, thorough, and absolutely devastating in its clear documentation of exactly what had occurred. Mom called me that evening, and for the first time she sounded genuinely scared rather than just defensive. "Serafina, honey, you have to call off Marcus. This is getting out of hand. We never intended for this to become a legal issue. We just wanted to give Delphine a beautiful wedding. Surely we can work this out within the family." "You had 4 months to work this out within the family," I replied coldly. "Instead, you chose to lie to me repeatedly while systematically stealing my inheritance. Now you are facing the consequences of that choice." "But we cannot possibly pay back $80,000 right now. You know Dad's business has been struggling and we used our savings for the wedding deposits. If you push this legal issue, you could destroy our credit, our reputation, everything we have worked for." The irony was staggering. They were worried about their financial security being destroyed after they had casually destroyed mine. "You should have considered those consequences before you decided to commit financial abuse," I told her. "I did not create this problem, you did." Meanwhile, the wedding drama was reaching epic proportions. Delphine had apparently spent the last 2 days calling vendors trying to negotiate payment plans and extensions. Several vendors had already pulled out, completely unwilling to risk providing services without guaranteed payment. The venue was demanding the remaining balance within 48 hours or the event would be canceled. Delphine's future mother-in-law, Mrs. Whitmore, called me directly, which was unprecedented since we barely knew each other. Her tone was icy and accusatory. "Miss Serafina, I understand there has been some sort of family financial disagreement that is jeopardizing my son's wedding. I hope you understand that this reflects very poorly on your family's character and reliability. Bradley comes from a family where we honor our commitments." I had to bite back laughter at the sheer audacity. "Mrs. Whitmore, if your family values honoring commitments, perhaps you should ask why my mother committed to expenses using money that was not hers to spend. The financial disagreement you mentioned is actually a case of theft that I am considering reporting to police." The silence on the other end was profound. Finally, she said, "I think there may have been some miscommunication about the family financial arrangements. Perhaps we should postpone the wedding until this can be resolved properly. That call apparently triggered a complete meltdown in the Whitmore household. Within hours, I heard from 3 different family members that Bradley's parents were seriously questioning whether their son should marry into a family with such obvious financial and ethical problems. The perfect wedding that had been worth stealing my inheritance for was now falling apart spectacularly. Dad finally called me himself, something he rarely did for serious conversations. His voice was tired and defeated. Serafina, I need you to know that I did not initially know about the account withdrawals. Your mother handled most of the wedding financial planning, and I trusted her to manage it appropriately. When I found out where the money was actually coming from, I told her she needed to discuss it with you immediately. This was the first crack in their united front, and it revealed something important. When did you find out, Dad? About 6 weeks ago. I started asking questions when the expenses seemed much higher than what we could afford. Your mother assured me that everything was handled properly and that you were aware of the situation. So for 6 weeks you knew I was being lied to and you said nothing. The pause was long and uncomfortable. I trusted your mother's judgment about how to handle family financial matters. I realize now that was a mistake. It was not exactly an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, which was more than I had gotten from anyone else. Dad had always been the passive parent, avoiding conflict and letting Mom make most family decisions. His failure to protect me was different from her active betrayal, but it was still a failure. That night, I received the most surprising call of all. Bradley himself asked to meet with me privately. We met at a neutral coffee shop, and he looked genuinely uncomfortable and embarrassed. Serafina, I want you to know that I had no idea about the source of the wedding funding until this week. Delphine and your mother told me that family money was available for the wedding, and I assumed that meant it was budgeted family funds, not your personal inheritance. Bradley was actually more reasonable than I had expected. I come from a family where financial transparency is important, and this whole situation makes me very uncomfortable. I love Delphine, but I cannot start a marriage built on money that was essentially stolen from her sister. That sets a terrible precedent for our future. He paused, looking genuinely conflicted. I have been thinking about whether we should postpone the wedding until this can be resolved properly. My parents are already expressing serious concerns about the family dynamics they are witnessing. I found myself feeling sorry for Bradley. He was caught in the middle of a family drama that he had not created, engaged to someone whose character was proving to be much different than he had believed. But I also realized that this crisis was revealing important truths about who Delphine really was underneath the princess facade. The next phase of my plan was about to begin, and the entire family structure was already cracking under the pressure of finally facing consequences for their actions. The breaking point came exactly 1 week before the scheduled wedding date. I had been monitoring the family group chat and social media posts, watching the increasingly desperate attempts to salvage the situation. What I discovered during my deeper investigation would expose a web of financial manipulation that went far beyond my stolen inheritance. While reviewing my credit report with Uncle Marcus, we found something disturbing. There were credit inquiries from the past year that I had never authorized, all traced back to Mom's attempts to secure additional funding for wedding expenses. She had tried to open credit cards, personal loans, and even a home equity line of credit using my name and credit score. Most applications had been denied due to income verification failures, but the pattern showed a systematic attempt to defraud multiple financial institutions using my identity. Serafina, this is identity theft, Marcus said grimly. Your mother has committed multiple felonies here. This goes way beyond family drama into serious criminal territory. Armed with this evidence, I made copies of everything and drove to the police station. Detective Rodriguez listened carefully as I explained the situation, reviewing the bank statements, credit reports, and documentation of unauthorized applications. Her expression grew increasingly serious as the scope of the fraud became clear. Ma'am, what you are describing constitutes identity theft, financial elder abuse if your grandmother's inheritance was targeted specifically, and potentially wire fraud since electronic transfers were involved, Detective Rodriguez explained. "These are federal crimes with serious penalties. Are you prepared to file formal charges against your mother?" The moment felt surreal. I was sitting in a police station preparing to press criminal charges against the woman who had raised me. But I thought about Grandma Eleanor's intentions about my stolen future, about the years of manipulation and favoritism that had led to this moment. Yes, I want to file charges. The investigation moved quickly once law enforcement became involved. Bank records were subpoenaed, revealing the full timeline of withdrawals and attempted fraudulent applications. Phone records showed dozens of calls between Mom and various financial institutions where she had impersonated me to gather account information. But the most shocking revelation came when Detective Rodriguez called me 3 days later. "Miss Serafina, our investigation has uncovered additional victims. Your mother has been systematically stealing from other family members as well. Your great-aunt Margaret's estate account, your cousin Jennifer's college fund that your grandmother established, even small amounts from your father's business account. This appears to be a pattern of behavior spanning several years." I felt sick. Mom had not just stolen from me. She had been running a family-wide embezzlement scheme, targeting anyone who had trusted her with financial access. Great-aunt Margaret was 83 and relied on that estate money for her medical expenses. Cousin Jennifer was supposed to start college in the fall with that fund. The police executed a search warrant at my parents' house on Thursday afternoon. I was not there, but Patricia called me immediately afterward to describe the scene. "They took computers, financial documents, everything. Your mother was arrested, Serafina. She was actually handcuffed and put in a police car in front of the whole neighborhood." Dad called me from the police station, his voice broken. "Serafina, I had no idea how extensive this was. The investigators are showing me bank records I have never seen before. Your mother has been stealing from everyone, including my business payroll account. I think she may have a gambling problem or some kind of addiction we never knew about." The gambling revelation explained everything. Later investigation would reveal that Mom had been playing online poker and visiting casinos for over 2 years, systematically losing family money and then stealing from relatives to cover her losses and maintain the facade of financial stability. The wedding expenses had been just the latest in a long line of financial crimes designed to hide her addiction. Delphine's reaction was exactly what I expected. She showed up at my apartment that evening, mascara streaked down her face, alternating between rage and desperate pleading. "You destroyed our family. Mom is in jail because of you. The wedding is completely ruined. Bradley's parents want nothing to do with us, and everyone thinks we are criminals." "Mom destroyed the family when she decided to steal from everyone who trusted her," I replied calmly. "I just refused to let her continue getting away with it." "But she is our mother. Family protects each other. You could have handled this privately instead of involving police and ruining everything." The entitlement was breathtaking. Even with Mom sitting in jail for multiple felonies, even with evidence of systematic theft from elderly relatives, Delphine still believed I was the problem for refusing to enable the criminal behavior. "Delphine, she stole from Great-Aunt Margaret's medical fund. She stole Jennifer's college money. She has been committing crimes against our entire family for years. When exactly should I have prioritized protecting a criminal over protecting her victims?" "Those are just details. The important thing is keeping the family together." That response told me everything I needed to know about Delphine's character. She was not upset about the crimes themselves, only about the consequences that affected her personally. The family unity she claimed to value was really just a system that allowed her to benefit, while others paid the price. Bradley arrived as Delphine was leaving, and he looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a week. "Serafina, I want to apologize for my family's initial reaction. We had no idea about the criminal activity, and we should not have blamed you for protecting yourself. My parents are actually impressed by how you handled this situation." He paused, looking genuinely sad. "I have to tell you that I am calling off the engagement. This situation has revealed things about Delphine's character that I cannot overlook. When I suggested we postpone the wedding until the legal issues were resolved, she actually asked if my parents would loan us money to pay for it anyway. She seems more upset about missing her party than about her mother's crimes. I felt a wave of satisfaction that was probably not entirely healthy, but I could not help it. Justice was finally being served, and people were finally seeing Delphine for who she really was underneath the golden child facade. The local newspaper picked up the story 2 days later. Local woman arrested for multi-year family embezzlement scheme. The article detailed the charges and mentioned that the crimes were discovered when one victim pressed charges after finding their inheritance money had been stolen for wedding expenses. Our family's dirty secrets were now public record, and the social consequences were swift and brutal. Dad's business reputation was severely damaged by association. Delphine's social media influencer aspirations evaporated overnight when the story went viral in our community. Several family members who had initially criticized me for causing drama were now apologizing and admitting they had been wrong. The criminal empire built on lies, favoritism, and theft was finally collapsing, and I was watching it happen with a sense of vindication I had never imagined possible. The aftermath moved with devastating speed. Mom was denied bail due to the multi-victim nature of her crimes and the flight risk posed by her access to additional family financial accounts. She sat in county jail wearing an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the respectable mother and community member facade she had maintained for so many years. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, and Uncle Marcus advised me to attend to demonstrate the impact of her crimes on the victims. Walking into that courtroom and seeing Mom in handcuffs was surreal. She looked smaller, older, defeated in a way I had never seen before. When she saw me in the gallery, her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The prosecutor, Ms. Chen, laid out the charges methodically: identity theft, wire fraud, elder financial abuse, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged applications, recorded phone calls where Mom had impersonated me to financial institutions. The total amount stolen across all victims exceeded $200,000 over 3 years. Your Honor, the defendant systematically targeted vulnerable family members, exploiting their trust and affection to fund her gambling addiction, Ms. Chen stated. She stole from an elderly relative's medical fund, from college savings accounts, from inheritance money specifically designated for individual beneficiaries. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated criminal enterprise targeting her own family. Mom's defense attorney tried to argue for leniency based on her addiction and family circumstances, but the judge was not sympathetic. Ms. Reynolds, you have violated the most basic bonds of family trust. You targeted elderly relatives and young people who relied on you for financial guidance. These are serious felonies with real victims who have suffered significant harm. Bail was set at $50,000, which Dad could not afford to pay. Mom would remain in jail until trial, which was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The local media coverage intensified, with our family becoming a cautionary tale about financial abuse within families. The ripple effects spread through our community like wildfire. Dad's construction business lost 3 major contracts when clients became concerned about his association with the criminal charges. The family reputation that had taken decades to build crumbled in a matter of days. Delphine's engagement being called off became public knowledge, adding another layer of gossip and speculation. Delphine herself was spiraling completely out of control. Without the wedding to focus on, and with her social standing in ruins, she began posting increasingly unhinged content on social media. She alternated between blaming me for destroying the family and claiming that everyone was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Her influencer collaborations disappeared overnight as brands distanced themselves from the scandal. The most satisfying moment came when Mrs. Whitmore called me personally to apologize. Miss Serafina, my family owes you a sincere apology. We initially blamed you for disrupting the wedding, but we now understand that you exposed serious criminal behavior that needed to be addressed. Bradley has told us how you handled this situation with dignity and appropriate legal channels. She paused before continuing. I also want you to know that we are grateful this came to light before the marriage. The character traits we have observed in Delphine during this crisis would have made for a very difficult and potentially dangerous marriage for our son. Even better was the call from cousin Jennifer, whose college fund had been part of Mom's theft spree. Serafina, I cannot thank you enough for having the courage to report this. I was wondering why my account balance seemed lower than expected, but I trusted Aunt Carol's explanations about market fluctuations. If you had not exposed this, I might not have had enough money for my senior year. Great Aunt Margaret's response was the most heartbreaking and validating. At 83, she had been struggling to afford her medications while Mom stole from her estate account to fund gambling losses. "Sweetheart, your grandmother Eleanor raised you right," she told me through tears. "She would be so proud of how you stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult." The restitution hearing revealed the full scope of the financial devastation. Mom had stolen from 7 different family members over 3 years, with my inheritance being the largest single theft, but not the only one. The total amount, including interest and penalties, exceeded $250,000. Dad would have to sell their house and liquidate all assets to begin making payments to victims. But the most shocking revelation came when the forensic accountant testified about the gambling losses. Mom had lost over $400,000 at casinos and online poker sites, meaning she had been stealing money as fast as she could access it, creating an ever-expanding circle of victims to feed her addiction. The defendant was essentially running a Ponzi scheme within her own family, the accountant explained. She would steal from one relative to cover shortfalls discovered by another, all while continuing to gamble and lose additional funds. Without intervention, this would have continued until every family member with accessible assets had been victimized. Dad filed for divorce 3 days after the restitution hearing. His attorney made it clear that this was partly a strategy to protect any remaining assets from being seized for victim compensation, but I also sensed genuine betrayal and rage that had been building as the scope of Mom's deception became clear. "I trusted her with everything," Dad told me during one of our awkward coffee meetings. "The business accounts, the house, our retirement savings. I had no idea she was capable of this level of manipulation. I keep wondering what other lies I never discovered." The trial was scheduled for early fall, but Mom's attorney was already discussing plea negotiations. With the overwhelming evidence and multiple victims, a conviction was virtually guaranteed. The only question was whether she would serve 8 years or 12 in federal prison. Delphine made one final attempt to manipulate the situation, showing up at my apartment with a proposal that was so absurd I almost laughed. "If you withdraw the charges against Mom, I will pay you back the money myself over time. We can keep this in the family and avoid all this public humiliation." "With what money, Delphine? You have never had a real job, your influencer career is over, and your wealthy fiancé dumped you. Bradley's family might reconsider if the legal issues go away." I stared at her, amazed by her complete failure to understand reality. Delphine Mom did not just steal from me. She stole from 7 family members, including elderly relatives and college students. Even if I wanted to drop charges, which I do not, the other victims and the federal prosecutor would continue the case. The fantasy world she had lived in her entire life was finally colliding with reality, and she had no skills to cope with consequences or accountability. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of my new house, looking out at the garden I had planted, with money recovered through the restitution process. It was not the house I had originally planned to buy, but it was mine, purchased with clean money that nobody could take away from me. The mortgage was manageable, the neighborhood was peaceful, and most importantly, I had learned to trust my own judgment about what I deserved. Mom had ultimately accepted a plea deal, 8 years in federal prison, plus full restitution to all victims. The judge had been clear that the sentence reflected both the severity of her crimes and the particular betrayal of targeting vulnerable family members. During her brief statement at sentencing, she had finally acknowledged the full scope of her wrongdoing, though I suspected it was more about reducing her sentence than genuine remorse. "I destroyed my family's trust and security to feed an addiction that I should have sought help for years ago," she had said. "I targeted people who loved me, and I have no excuse for that choice." I hope someday my family can forgive me, but I understand if they cannot. I felt nothing during her statement. The anger had faded months ago, replaced by a peaceful indifference. She was no longer my problem to solve or my burden to carry. The woman who raised me had made her choices, and now she was facing the natural consequences of those decisions. Dad had moved to a smaller apartment across town after selling the house to pay restitution. Our relationship was slowly rebuilding, but it was fundamentally different now. He was more present, more engaged, and more willing to acknowledge the dysfunctional family patterns that had enabled Mom's behavior for so long. "I failed you by not protecting you from your mother's favoritism," he admitted during one of our monthly dinners. "I told myself that staying out of conflicts was keeping the peace, but really I was just avoiding responsibility. You deserved better from both of us." Delphine had moved to another state ostensibly to start fresh, but really to escape the social consequences of the scandal. She had sent me a letter 6 weeks ago that was equal parts apology and self-justification, claiming she was in therapy and learning about family dysfunction. I had read it once and then thrown it away. Her growth was not my responsibility either. The most surprising development had been the relationships that strengthened through this crisis. Uncle Marcus and I had grown much closer, bonding over legal discussions and shared values about accountability and justice. Aunt Patricia had become like a second mother, someone I could trust completely with personal matters and financial decisions. Cousin Jennifer and I had developed a genuine friendship based on our shared experience of being victimized by someone we trusted. Great Aunt Margaret had become a regular part of my life, joining me for monthly dinners, where we shared stories about Grandma Eleanor and laughed about family gossip that no longer had the power to hurt us. "You know what your grandmother would say about all this," Margaret told me recently. "She would say that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, not the ones you are born into. Blood does not automatically deserve loyalty if that blood is poisoned with selfishness and entitlement." The chosen family I had built was small but solid. These were people who had shown their character during crisis, who valued honesty and mutual respect over keeping up appearances. With them, I never had to worry about hidden agendas or financial manipulation. Trust was earned and maintained through consistent actions, not demanded based on genetic relationships. My career had flourished during this period as well. The skills I had developed managing crisis and standing up for myself translated into professional confidence and leadership abilities. I had been promoted to senior developer and was leading a team on innovative projects that challenged me intellectually and creatively. The house itself had become a symbol of independence and security that nobody could take away from me. Every room reflected my own choices and preferences, not compromises made to keep peace with difficult family members. The garden was thriving, the mortgage payments were manageable, and most importantly, every financial decision was entirely mine to make. I had also started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. My experience had taught me how easily family members could exploit trust and affection for personal gain, and I wanted to help others recognize warning signs before they became victims. Family financial abuse is one of the most underreported crimes in America. I explained to support groups. People assume that family members have good intentions, but genetics do not automatically create character. Trust should be earned and verified, especially when money is involved. The speaking opportunities had been therapeutic for me and educational for others. I shared my story not for sympathy, but to demonstrate that holding family members accountable for criminal behavior was not betrayal. It was self-preservation and justice. Looking back, I could see how the crisis had revealed truths that had always been there but were hidden under layers of family loyalty, mythology, and conflict avoidance. Mom had always been manipulative and boundary-crossing. Delphine had always been entitled and selfish. Dad had always been conflict avoidant and passive. The criminal behavior was just an extreme expression of character traits that had been present for years. But I had also discovered strength in myself that I never knew existed. The ability to stand up to manipulation, to prioritize my own well-being over family harmony, to seek justice, even when it was difficult and socially uncomfortable. These were skills that had served me well beyond this specific crisis. The final legal paperwork had been completed last month. All restitution payments were current, the criminal case was closed, and the civil penalties had been satisfied. I was officially free from any ongoing legal obligations related to Mom's crimes. More importantly, I was emotionally free from the guilt and obligation that had defined my family relationships for so long. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pressing charges against my mother, if I think there might have been another way to handle the situation that would have preserved family relationships. My answer is always the same. The family relationships I lost were built on lies, manipulation, and exploitation. They were not worth preserving. The relationships I have now are based on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine affection. These people celebrate my successes, support me during difficulties, and treat me as an equal partner in the relationship. This is what healthy family looks like, whether it is biological or chosen. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what was right? Family karma is real, and sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are supposed to love us unconditionally. Share your thoughts in the comments below about how you have handled family betrayal or financial manipulation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for watching my journey from victim to survivor, and remember that you deserve relationships built on respect, not exploitation. May your chosen family bring you the love and loyalty that your blood family should have provided.